Facebook. Welcome, everybody. I'm Love Coach Scott Catamas.
And I'm Trish Wright.
And it's another episode of Straight Talk. And as you can see, we've got some really interesting people with us. And just like last week, we wanted to support our dear friend Elizabeth April in her new book. We get to support another dear friend who has also just written a book, which we're going to be talking about. And he's got some amazing guests that are part of the book and that are now part of this evening. I am about to introduce you to Alan Steinfeld, whom I first met in 1988. I was filming a movie in Maui, and he was staying on the property where we were filming.
I was living in a tent.
And he upgraded quickly when we came around. And he actually became our assistant director, and he did a great job. And we've been friends ever since. So I am putting the spotlight on the man of the hour, the author of the new book, Making Contact. Here is Alan Steinfeld.
Making Contact. That's right. If you can see it it's kind of disappearing, but that's what Making Contact is like. It comes and it goes. Exactly. I'll take that down. I'll take down my artificial background. But thank you, Scott. And yes, that was a momentous occasion, meeting you on Maui in my tent. I went to Maui to get away from film production I was doing in New York, and their film crew shows up at my door, and I said, okay, I'm in Maui. I'll take a job, not vacation. So getting to this book, and you keep reoccurring every couple of years in my life. It's a kind of cycle there. Yeah. And thank you for doing the show about this new book called Making Contact, because it's not just me. It's not just my book about the UFO situation. I've got 11 different authors, plus George Noory, who wrote the foreword. And it's a progression going from the exoteric, from the external phenomena of, there's ships out there, the nuts and bolts and the government cover-up, to how this affects our consciousness. How will making contact with the others change us as human beings? And that's as you go deeper and deeper into the book. And I have two of the contributors here that have been part of this more deeper dive. So I start the external with Nick Pope, who worked for the Ministry of Defense, and I go to Linda Moulton Howe and her investigations, and Whitley Strieber. And then I get to Henrietta Weekes, who just recently had this awakened experience. And I thought, I have to put her story in there because she's one of the newcomers who, because of my suggestion, said, hey, Henrietta, have you considered the fact that we're part of a bigger cosmos? So we'll get to your story. And then I want to introduce an old friend of mine, Darryl Anka, who I'm sure most people know at this point. He is world famous for being the channel for the extraterrestrial Bashar. And I thought it was so important to have Darryl as himself in the book, because he's had the longest relationship I know of with an extraterrestrial, and he has quite an insider view about it. And he talks about the telepathic contact with this being. Telepath means telepathy and empathy, the word that I guess Darryl and Bashar coined. So why don't we start with Darryl, if we can. Oh, before we do that, I want to say, Henrietta, why don't you tell Darryl what happened when you were reading his chapter in the book, because I think that's a great place to start.
Okay, good. Well, hi, everyone. So obviously I read Alan's book, which is really fantastic, by the way. It really, like he says, leads you through a progression of so many different parts of the story, like pieces of the puzzle around UFO and abduction experiences, what they might signify. And I loved every essay in there, but I read Darryl's, and then and I loved that. And then I went to sleep, and I had a dream, which was one of those dreams which was very unlike any other dream I'd ever had. I've only had a few, which felt like I'd literally gone into another world, which was very brightly colored, the sort of saturated colors, which I'd never experienced in a dream. And it was kind of reminded me a bit of Blade Runner, but a lot more sort of joyful, that kind of landscape. Yeah. No, but there's sort of lots of, like a super futuristic, but also things that I didn't recognize, buildings and shapes and beings that I didn't recognize in these little kind of craft. And I wish I could remember the details. Of course, I forgot them, but there were very specific kind of interactions and interchanges that I had with these beings. And it felt like I was at home, but I also wasn't me as a human. I was like just a form of intelligence. It was, but the whole experience, the whole dream felt kind of joyous and adventurous, but I was in a completely different world. And I'd never had a dream like that before. And I told Alan, and he said, well, I think, that has something to do with the fact you read the essay. Yeah.
But what do you think is going on, Darryl? I mean, and then we'll go into more. And of course, Scott, Trish, jump in at any point. That's your show. But yeah.
Yeah, it's not, well, thank you, first of all, Henrietta. That's really cool that you had that. The only thing I can suggest is a lot of times when people are, let's just say, presented with certain concepts that Bashar has brought through, there's a particular frequency to them that is a very high frequency that often people do report that once they're exposed to it, it does shift them somewhat into a slightly altered version of reality. And that can sometimes easily present itself in dreams when our conscious mind is out of the way. So I think what you were kind of experiencing, not that Bashar's world looks like what you described, but certainly the energy, the joyous energy is what I experience all the time when he comes through me, because they're just high on life. I mean, there's just not any shadow in there at all in terms of their experience. And so if any of that sort of rubbed off on your consciousness during that particular chapter, that's great. That's a wonderful thing. And thank you for sharing that with me.
So we'll go into your chapter a little bit about the telepathic. And, it's interesting. 10 out of the 11 essays in this book mentions telepathy as a kind of universal exchange. So, and then your particular situation where you're actually, conversing in a sense. So how do we emerge as this telepathic species? I'm just curious. What do we need to do?
Well, as Bashar has sort of described it, and the reason that he refers to it as telepathy is, he's attempting to get us to understand that there is a different mechanical explanation for a lot of things that we consider to be metaphysical experiences, rather than the older, outdated definitions. For example, most people would think that telepathy means that we're reading someone else's mind. What Bashar is basically saying is that's not really mechanically what's happening. What's happening is you are getting your own energy to be sort of on a similar wavelength with someone else. And therefore, when you're on a similar wavelength, you actually have the same thoughts at the same time, because that's the thought that goes with that frequency. So basically, you're reading your own mind, but synchronistically, you happen to know exactly what the other person is thinking. And this is why it's telepathy, because you see this example all the time with people who are in love with one another. Because that vibration, that similar harmonic resonance between those people allow them to really be on the same wavelength. And very often you'll see that people who are in love, they know exactly what each other is thinking. They finish each other's sentences. They hardly have to say a word to know what the other person is thinking, but that's just because they're having the same thought at the same time, because they're on the same frequency. So really the idea is the more in love we are with each other, the more telepathic we will naturally become.
Actually, that brings us to love coach Scott Catamas. Is that true? Because Scott is counseling people all the time on that, I guess, merging, right? So how do you interpret what Darryl said? Trish.
Telepathy is all I know. I'm just like, oh my gosh. We were talking to Darryl just before about the guest that we had on, just last week. And she had shared about her partner and her not even having to say anything, that they can just talk to each other because they're just so in love. And we had shared that we were both like, we love this one so much. And that really resonated with me, to know that it is the same frequency that we're connecting to, and we can hear the same frequency, hearing the same frequency. And I really love that. That just totally, yes.
Yeah, I'm that's the first time I've heard the word telepathy, and I'm going to use it all the time. I think it's beautiful, Darryl. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank Bashar.
Thank you, Bashar.
I mean, he sort of likened it to tuning forks, right? If you have two tuning forks that are tuned to the same frequency and you start one ringing, the vibrations will cause sympathetic vibrations in the other fork, and it'll start ringing too. So it's sort of mechanically like that. You're feeding off each other's frequencies and basically being on the same wavelength.
Something that I thought about as we were talking about it, and I'd like to ask you, Darryl, and then of course bring in, of course, Ellen and Henrietta.
Sure.
My wife, who is the person I was closest to in this life, passed away about 9 years ago. And I was very fortunate to have quite a bit of interaction with her in different ways after she passed. But the clearest communication that I had with her, she said, please learn to differentiate between your memory of me and my personality. And memories are wonderful, and that's a beautiful thing, but my personality died with my body. And now I'm a field of energy. And I've been working with that concept ever since she said that to me for 9 years, being a field of energy. And so I thought of that when you were talking. So I'd love to just hear any thoughts that you might have about that.
Yeah, we're all a bigger identity than just this personality. This personality physically is kind of a focus. We've focused ourselves down in a way, or at least a part of our greater being down, to have a physical experience. And when we are done with the physical experience, we're really coming more as an expanded version of ourselves with a larger identity. So we're not exactly just that personality anymore. We're much more than that. That personality remains contained within what the greater being is, but we're far more than what the physical presentation is, because personality, in a sense, is a temporary construct to navigate physical reality. So when we give that up, it's like taking the glasses off and you have a different kind of perspective, and you are a different kind of being that still contains what you remember as the personality, but now you need to sort of relate to that being as a larger entity that is more representative of the true natural essential being that she is, or on that level.
What a beautiful description. So in your experience, since we're talking about making contact, how would you say that higher intelligence or our galactic friends, they're more in touch with their multidimensional self, or their bigger field of energy, and that the more we interact with them, it naturally, 100th monkey, if you will, helps us to also awaken beyond our own illusion of separation, our own illusion of polarity.
Yes, and this is why Bashar encourages us all the time to follow our passion, because following your passion raises your frequency, and raising your frequency, for lack of a better term, makes you a better antenna and a receiver for higher frequency communication and interaction with beings that have already evolved to that level. Bashar's described his reality very much like what you just said, because he's saying it's not like we're a bunch of aliens just walking around on a different planet. For him, his reality is literally like walking through a multidimensional dream every single second, because they're evolved to the point where they're almost non-physical, and yet they still retain a physicality. So they have qualities of physical beings and qualities of spirit, which allows them to be very flexible in their consciousness in space and time, which is one of the reasons why he can connect and do a channeling, is because to him, time and space are not necessarily the barriers that they seem to be to us. So yeah, they live at least on, the beings that are on that level live a very multidimensional kind of an experience, as he's described it.
You see, that's why I thought it was so important to include that perspective
Yeah.
in with all the government disclosure, who's in the ships, and go into this perspective that we are becoming more of ourselves in a way. I mean, making contact, as I've been saying, is an inside job almost, and right?
Yeah, it is.
And so that's also why I want to include Henrietta's essay, because what she does is approach her experience from a non-linear point of view. So it's like, so Henrietta, why don't you talk a little bit about your experience as in a writer and putting together, you know, this kind of poetic, lyrical unfoldment? Because also what I loved about what you said is that when you started to consider the possibility that there are beings out there, somehow another part of you opened up, another part of your brain, another part of your awareness. Can you talk about that in your contribution?
Yeah. I mean, so for me, it's a very recent thing to be looking at specifically the UFO and the, contact experience with other beings like abduction. And I was kind of catapulted into it very quickly when Alan said, are you looking at this? And I said, no, I'm looking at many other, I mean, there's one particular Indian sage that Alan knows that I'm very drawn to, called Sri Aurobindo, who talked very much at the beginning of last century about the new being that we're becoming, which, we're here embodied in matter, but how we're going to drive spirit more deeply into matter and become an entirely new being. And anyway, I've read a lot of his works, and Alan knows that I just was naturally drawn to it. But then when he mentioned the UFO thing, for a start, I'd already started seeing these triangles above Alan's head when I was talking to him before he'd mentioned the UFO thing.
Yeah, that was weird. That was weird because you had, and of course we'll talk, I mean, Darryl and Bashar talk a lot about triangles. We'll get to that. But
yeah, exactly. And when I'd read in Darryls, which I reread today just to refresh my memory about when he'd seen this black triangle over, Los Angeles was it in the 70s you saw it?
Yes. 73.
Yeah, which was, when I was being born myself. Anyway, it was it was very interesting to this. So it was kind of a set of symbols and synchronicities that happened, accelerated very, very fast around this time that Alan and I started talking. And then he recommended I read Communion. And then I'd had these recurring dreams as a child that I could never quite understand at all. But they suddenly made sense in the framework of the abduction experience and the UFO and some kind of, what do you call it? Sort of, not expansion of consciousness, but just, activation of different parts of the mind or of being. Mm-hmm. But it was a very rapid acceleration for me around this time of reading Communion, talking to Alan, and then exploring my dreams and experiences that I'd had throughout my life that I couldn't really make sense of, but they're still being pieced together. So, my essay in the book is really about sort of piecing these parts together. And my father passed away almost exactly a year ago, actually, on this coming Sunday. And I had a lot of experiences where I felt I was definitely connecting with him, but he through physical signs, in the physical world. And
well, you said white feathers kept dropping every time you thought of your father.
Yeah, and literally, and not just sort of, they would appear either on my table or in the car or on my foot, but very specifically, like almost, well, one just flew right in front of my face when I asked him for help, like, Dad, I need some help with this. I was walking along and this feather just literally just wafted and then wafted down in front of my face like a zigzag, like, so these things, I'm talking about them like this because I think that it's all connected, because what's unfolding for me is that these different expressions of intelligence and life are opening up for me, and I think for a lot of us, that it's whether it's in the dream world or the actual physical world. And I mean, for me, it's just been an experience of joy. Like there are a lot of sort of neuroses and niggling worries that kind of immediately evaporated as soon as I felt like, I kind of get like much more about who we all are. Like, it's not what I thought at all. And the dreams that I'd had as a kid making sense in the framework of the contact experience that
Does
I've
that
now
make
explored.
sense? Or
Yeah.
just commenting, Darryl, have you heard that kind of thing before as people open up?
Oh, absolutely. She's definitely, well, congratulations. You're definitely putting the pieces together, and I've heard similar stories like that for people who are on this kind of path, because that's what you encounter. It kind of goes through these kinds of stages for a lot of people. And it is about, activating, awakening, expanding, becoming more aware of more of reality, and starting to also realize that what we call the dream reality and the physical reality are really just kind of two different types of dreams. And
Exactly.
it's becoming more lucid in this reality, as well as becoming more lucid in the dream reality.
But there's one point, Darryl, I think Scott and Trish would be interested in this point. I'm sorry, were you going to say something, Scott?
I was, but go ahead, and I'll speak after you
Okay,
do.
the point that you make in this essay, I told you to put it in the essay because it's in your film, First Contact. Darryl did a movie about Bashar's mission, which is he's a contact specialist, and he's here on whatever level he's here to help open us up to exactly what Henrietta and all of us are awakening to. But you said there was a dream you had with Bashar where you approached him, and the experience was so much, this is what and it's in the book, that you felt you were being dissolved, your identity self, and it was kind of too much in a way. Or what do we talk about that?
Yeah, it's the idea being that they operate on a very high frequency level. And one of the reasons that they share information in the way that they do, kind of at arm's length, is they understand that in our history, our mentality has been kind of compartmentalized. Our frequency is often lower because we're giving into fear-based beliefs and things like that. So I kind of wanted to ask, as many people ask, well, why don't you just land and show yourselves? And he was saying, basically, in the dream, I'll show you why. And when he landed in the dream and got out and started walking toward me, when he was about 20 feet away, it's like I lost my identity and I saw my own body through his eyes, and my body recoiled. And he said, see, basically, this is the idea, is our frequency is so much higher, we can actually overwhelm you. And the whole idea of sharing the information with you is to help you absorb it in a way that increases your frequency to become more like us, so that we can have contact. But you have to kind of meet us halfway, because it's not about us doing things for you. It's about us doing things together as equals. And for a race of beings that operates on an extremely high frequency, it tends to, in being exposed to it, it tends to pull things into our awareness that we may not be ready to integrate. And he's saying you can actually kind of go into almost like a psychic shock if you're not ready to face all of those fear-based beliefs within yourself or limitations within your belief system that prevent you from being truly who you are. So it was kind of an object lesson, a very visceral object lesson about how important it is for us to actually get ready for contact with beings like that by upgrading ourselves first. Because again, it's not about giving our power over to them. It's about becoming self-empowered.
Wow. Isn't that interesting, Scott? Yeah.
Yeah, so this is all fascinating. So what I'm really hearing from Darryl that I just want to riff on is we got to raise our vibration, and that's what needs to happen on this planet. Obviously, we need to, we heard his teaching about going from reptile brain reactivity to frontal lobe responsiveness. We're having to go from a culture that just takes to a culture that is sustainable. So we're having to really raise our vibration. And as we raise our vibration, we have a better chance to be able to manage.
Right.
One last thought, and then I have a question. The thought is just whenever we are encountering a being of higher vibration, or even a human being who can love us more, the greater the light, the greater the shadow. And that's why it's so important. And that's why often people that have had extreme mystical experiences, extreme spiritual experiences, extreme love has come in, extreme infusion of money, often have actually had tragic results, because that infusion of love, light, energy casts a great shadow.
Mm.
And if someone hasn't learned how to manage or work with their shadow side, then they become a greater addict or a greater compulsive or whatever it might be.
Right. Right. That's exactly what Bashar said, because he said one of the fallacies that a lot of people have in the New Age is the idea that when you expand your consciousness, you're never going to be aware of the negative side again. He says it's just the opposite. The more you expand your consciousness, the more aware you are of the shadow side. It's just that you're also empowered to choose what you prefer without invalidating what you don't. So it is a matter of staying in balance with it so that you can process whatever comes up in the most beneficial way for you.
Like Trisha, Trisha's talked about that on this program, as a matter of fact, right, Trisha? Trish?
Yeah, actually, I have a question that I want to. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. So I'm a millennial. There's a group of people who are, okay, so I'm Y, Xenials, and then Alpha. And what I'm noticing, and this is specifically for you, is that what I'm noticing is that we're all becoming a little bit more androgynous and a whole lot more compassionate. And I'm curious what your thoughts are, and maybe the understanding with Bashar is like, I think that things are starting to shift where we're upgrading on a full generational level. Like things are just happening without us really knowing.
Yes, and Bashar's society is very much reflective of that idea, because even though they still express themselves in a sense as male and female, they're relatively androgynous in a lot of ways. And he has also said something which is really fascinating to me, is he said now for quite some time, for a few generations now, the humans being born on Earth are not just a new generation, they're actually a different species. The hybridization that's going on and the energies that are shifting within us is actually changing our DNA in ways to allow us to be more capable of funneling higher frequency energies through us. This is why it's so important to him to encourage us to act on what he calls the formula, which is following your passion to the best you can, with no insistence or assumption on the outcome, and choosing to remain in a positive state no matter what happens, so that you can get the benefit out of that situation, even if it's something you objectively don't prefer, and to dig down into our belief systems to understand what our beliefs are telling us, so that we can let go of the ones that really aren't in alignment with who our true essential selves are, and only act on the ones that are truly representative of our core frequency. But by doing this, by incorporating that formula into our daily activities, it is actually uplifting our vibration tremendously. And when you apply that formula in practical ways and precise ways, you actually start to experience physical reality almost coming apart at the seams. There's a lot more synchronicity, or at least more obviously so. Things start working more smoothly. Path of least resistance, all sorts of synchronistic connections start occurring. So it's really, from his point of view, the tool that helps us to really let go of all the things we've been taught to think we're supposed to be, and to allow us to actually act like the beings we are in this reality, and allow it to become much more fluid.
I have a follow-up question to that. It's on the same thing. So quite often, as probably most of the people watching this show are having mystical experiences, they're having, spiritual awakenings in their own unique ways. There's a trap of human nature of wanting to assign an interpretation or an understanding. One of my mentors was Bruce Joel Rubin, and he used to always say, don't make a religion out of your spiritual experience.
Right.
Right. Right. And so the question is about differentiating between our individuated psychic, spiritual, mystical experiences and group consensus reality, because that's where a lot of people get lost. And I'm curious what any of you have to say about that.
Does anyone else want to?
Well, you know, or the quote from the sage, Henrietta, that was that Aurobindo you were quoting. He, even though he was Hindu, really was into becoming a new species, thinking differently, thinking outside the box. And so talk about your research with him, because I think that's a key into that.
Yeah, well, and also I was very interested in what Trish was saying as a millennial, and this, you know, what you were saying about this kind of gender fluid. What was the other thing you said? Not just androgynous, but compassionate, and the compassion. Because I see that in a lot of my friends' children, like in the younger generation. There's definitely, and a lot of my friends' children are having these very, like, we would call them psychic experiences, like sort of channeling, like my friend's father, who passed away a long time ago. Literally, he just spoke at sort of the age 3 in her father's voice and said things that he used to say that he couldn't possibly have known. So you know, I do sort of believe that there's this higher frequency that is just happening. And Sri Aurobindo, I brought his book along because I always do, just to refer to, but he calls this body mind and the cellular mind being probably the key to our next mutation. Ooh. But as always, what is deepest shows up last. The first or original principle is the last to emerge from under wraps. One can only reach the bottom after traveling the whole course. This is the laborious evolutionary story of our ascent. For nothing is more outmoded than ideas. He talks about this kind of disintegration of like this mental that we've been living in, right? Which, you know, which is why I'm interested, for instance, in poetry, music, theatre as kind of like really effective expressions of who we are, which is sort of like limitless, infinite beings. You know, we can get very, going back to what Scott was saying about sort of trying to understand these experiences or being overwhelmed by them or making a religion of them. It's like that's the mind trying to kind of order it or to understand it, where it's actually kind of beyond that, you know? So I find like sometimes that, well, to use Darryl's expression, telepathy, you know, it's sort of beyond words. You kind of know sometimes you can communicate without using words. In fact, we have much greater communication without using words sometimes. So, and Sri Aurobindo manages to write a whole book with words that I felt was more like a transmission. That's why I was so drawn to it. This is kind of not what he was saying words. It was like this poetic transmission of like, oh yeah, we're so much greater than that. And maybe there's an intelligence within ourselves, within the body that we don't even understand yet. And isn't that the great next adventure? So that's kind of my connection to the UFO abduction experience literature. I feel like we're all beginning to understand ourselves in a completely different way within the physical world and the dream world and whatever else is out there.
Yeah,
it's great.
While we're on Aurobindo, just 2 quick things, because it's wonderful to meet somebody who is into Sri Aurobindo, because I've always appreciated him.
Yeah.
If you haven't yet, he wrote a short paper called The Dangers of Enlightenment. It's like, so look up The Dangers of Enlightenment by Sri Aurobindo.
It's exactly what you were talking about. Yeah,
very
because
it's very, very important. So Alan, you tapped into that Sri Aurobindo has something to say. The other thing that's interesting about Sri Aurobindo is I've heard from multiple sources that there was actually a triumvirate of human souls that came in to change our reality. Gandhi, Sri Aurobindo, and Paramahansa Yogananda. They all came in around the same time. They all left around the same time.
Mhm.
Aurobindo, of course, changing our understanding of reality. Gandhi changing our understanding of political change. And Yogananda changing our understanding that it's the universality of religion, as opposed to religions versus each other. And all three of them were friends. There's photos of the three of them together. And boy, can you imagine what that dinner party was like?
Well, I
I just
think
wanted to mention that about Shiro Binu, because
no, but I think that's an important point about not making your experience religion, not making UFOs a religion, not people are praying to Bashar, sort of show up, give, I know it's strange, and it's up to us. It's in what were you going to say, Darryl? Because it's our awakening. You go ahead.
You're right. And Bashar doesn't want to have anything at all to do with the idea of being turned into a religion, constantly making sure people understand that it's not about him, it's about you. And that he's simply sharing information that has worked for them and has absolutely no agenda that we have to believe what he's saying whatsoever. He's just giving us an opportunity to explore it and examine it. But it's our reality, it's our lives. And he wants us to understand really that it's all about self-empowerment and self-upliftment. They're happy to help, but they can only do so much because, again, we have our own lives to live. He has his life to live. He's not trying to live our lives for us, not trying to tell us what we have to do, what we should do, or anything like that, because he knows there's an infinite number of paths. If, as he often says, if there was only one path, there would only be one person. So look around. So it's just about, all roads sort of, leading ultimately to the same place. But many of us get there in a variety of wildly different ways. And that's okay, because that's what it's really all about. As Henrietta said, we are infinite eternal beings, as Bashar says. So, what's your rush?
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that as this experience, like my life has now become an experience of just continuous unfolding. I try not to kind of go like, well, this is that and this is that. It's this magic of actually not knowing, but just experiencing and then being led by that experience. And with some of these beings that I've come into contact with or, have seen, it's very much a relationship, which I'd read, which I enjoyed when I reread your essay today. It reminded me of like these certain beings that I've seen that are more like insects, huge, which, I felt like they gave me something and they were asking for something from me. So that in itself stopped me from thinking, that I'd seen the light and this was it. It was just more like it was a relationship that was going to continue to unfold, which clued me into, well, they gave me something which I was told to then give away, and that my job was to actually to perform for them what it was like to be a human being in my physical body. And so that was sort of it was basically my emotional range. I did a lot of weeping and a lot of laughing and that was kind of what they were wanting to see. I don't know what that means, but I'm just telling you that that's what happened to me.
I think that's really, really important, because the idea is humans, the way they're taught or have been taught, tend to think, okay, here's these, going back to sort of the religion thing, here's these higher beings and we have to bow down and know they're so much better than we are. And Bashar has really done a lot to dispel that notion, because he's basically saying, look, I know that a lot of you tend to think that you're in a kindergarten, but really you're in a graduating masterclass, because Earth is a tough school. There's a lot of challenges here. And the thing he wants us to understand is it's not a one-way street. They're getting a lot out of interacting with us. It's it's an exchange. It's an ongoing, eternal exchange that never ends in a variety of ways. So they're getting as much out of these interactions and relationships as we are. We may not always understand exactly what they're getting out of it from their point of view, but Bashar has assured us that they're getting a lot out of it, and that even some of the things that happen in the exchange and in the relationship are given to others, are passed along to others, because he says you're really a wonderful example of overcoming all sorts of challenges that are pretty startling. And there are other civilizations that can actually learn from that in their own experiences of overcoming challenges. So he said this is just, it's a constant interactive exchange of ideas and energy and information and perspectives. And it's just going all the time, and it never, ever, ever ends, ever.
I love what Bashar says. This is our last chance for density, this level of consciousness, this level of existence. Get it while you can, because we are graduating to this next awakening. So we need to get all those dense experiences in so we can actually go and make first contact, because I think our time of isolation is over. Our cosmic isolation is about to end, but we need to grow up, is what you guys are saying.
But can we have just enough density so that food and sex is still so special?
Yes.
Enough. Yeah.
They do have that, or did they grow out of that in their civilization, Darryl?
They don't do it in the physical sense anymore. It's an energy exchange. If they need to allow for a, what am I going to say, an atmosphere in which to create a new life, it's now something that's actually done outside the body in their reality in an energy exchange. That it's like imagine two spheres of energy overlapping, and in the overlap, a third life is created.
I wanted to say before I was disconnected, my computer just zapped out when there was a lot of energy. Really, I've never seen it do that. It just turned like pink and just went off.
Well, this keeps happening, Alan.
I don't know what's going on, but I'm saying there's an upgrade happening.
Surprising.
But I want to say that I wrote this book because there is no one truth. A little commercial for the book, Scott. Thank you. There's not one truth. Nobody has the ultimate answer, and there's levels of truth. So that's why this is a collection of 11 different essays, 11 different perspectives on this idea of meeting the extraterrestrial and what we are and what we can become. Because after you read this, I want the reader to come and just discover for themselves what's true, what piece from this essay or that essay, and where do they all come together, and how do we make our own way into this new world? Because I really think, and I've called my show New Realities for a long time, but I didn't know why. And now
great.
I really didn't. It's like, that's a good term. I don't, but this, I know, but I had a sense, but this is the new reality. This is the unknown that we're stepping into. We're stepping off the old wheel. I think the wheel of incarnation, in a sense, in the old way. And we're about to meet more of ourselves, but there's no script planned out. There's nothing that we can count on anymore. Is that what Bashar would say? I don't want to put words in his mouth, but.
Well, maybe not quite in that way, but yes, right. I mean, all bets are off in a sense. In other words, it's like we're splitting or experiencing more awareness of the fact that there are a multitude of realities that exist simultaneously. And it's our ability to choose what path we wish to experience. Some people will experience the idea of contact. Some people might not, because those are different Earths and they all exist at the same time. So it's up to us to make our choices, and our choices navigate us through the different versions of Earth that all exist, leading us into the version that is most reflective of the changes and vibrations that we've created within ourselves. So yes, it's sort of like there is no script, but there are a multitude of scripts that we can choose from to create our own story. And many people are sort of choosing similar stories who are interested in things like the expansion of consciousness, interested in things like forming contact with other beings. And so we are traveling sort of side by side. as a group, but there are other groups going in other directions. And again, whatever their path is that's right for them is what they get to decide as we decide what path is correct for us.
You know, I bet Trishan's, oh, Scott, I just want, oh, go, no.
Just an important
just-
question for you, Alan. How do we buy your book?
No, go
Jonas-
to Amazon. Thank
See?
you. Go into
Everybody.
Making Contact, Alan Steinfeld, and everybody else who's contributed, Linda Moulton Howe, Whitley Strieber, Darryl and Henrietta, Carol and Cory. But I just wanted to go back to what Darryl just said about the different realities, because I was going to say, Trish and Scott, in counseling and coaching, you're dealing, I would say, in relationships with people sometimes that are living in two separate realities. And you, how do you get them to be in the same or at least see the other person's reality? Because it's happening on the personal level, but Darryl and Henrietta are talking about it's happening on a much bigger level where we're not even on the same planet, even though we're living right next to somebody, you know?
I've always said that there are, how many people are on the planet right now? 8,
Seven
well,
billion. 7 point something. Yeah.
Oh, we've lost a few 100,000 over the last year.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, roughly 7.7 billion people on this planet. So that means there's 7.7 billion realities.
Mhm.
And even like multiply that by like hundreds to what direction we can go in, what we can choose. So the best way for me that I found to do that is to really get more curious about your experience. Like, what is your experience in your body? What's it feel like over here in this experience? And, you know, over the last few years, I've joked that I reincarnated to be here as a whole Disneyland experience. And I will fight for my right to be human and have human experiences. Like, I want to be sad. I want to have joy. I want to have all the like experiences of humanity, right? Because it's juicy.
Yeah, that's why Bashar said it's a graduating masterclass. You get to experience all the different lessons and really take them to heart and use them in whatever way works for you.
So beautiful. And the only way that we can do that is if I'm like, hey, Ellen, what's it like in your body right now? How are you feeling?
I think I ate too much food before going on the show, but yeah. But
I know that experience.
But it's not just the body. It's like you're seeing this little detail of something and someone else is seeing the big picture, and we're looking at the same thing, but seeing different things, you know. It's like
My favorite story about the blind man and the elephant.
right.
There's a wonderful thing too, though, in terms of when we are in different realities with someone that we're especially close to, a lover or a close friend. Absolutely, she's right. With anybody, be curious. Let's always be curious.
Are you going to assume my reality right now?
But in addition to that, if it's possible, stop talking and hold each other. When I'm working with couples, that's what I say, is I just hold each other, because your bodies remember love. And as he was saying, as Darryl was saying,
We'll leave you two alone, okay?
you just experience.
No, we won't.
Oh, sorry. What did you say?
I said, I just experienced. The world watched the best moment of my last month. When we hold each other and we just drop in, our bodies remember love. We are mammals, and we need homeostasis. And so as mammals coming together physically, it helps us to get out of the judgmental, categorical mind and come back into that same field of energy, that same vibration that Darryl was talking about earlier in the show. And then all of a sudden, it's amazing how couples that were fighting over something, if they just hold each other and relax into each other's arms, they can approach the conversation from a completely different place.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because it's really about finding out what is the conversation actually about. Because for the most part, it usually just comes down to, I want to know I'm loved. I want to know I'm heard. I want to know that I count. I want to know that my perspective is valid. And really almost every conversation that seems out of sorts, when you really stop and think about it, comes down to hearing the other person and what they're really saying, even though they might be using terminologies that really have nothing to do with the basic, you know, truth within. They're looking for the way to express usually the idea that they don't feel heard or they don't feel valid. And so, yeah, a lot of that just stop for a moment, as you said, and just really just feel each other and remember why you are attracted to one another as reflections for each other, because that's really what relationships are about, is everyone helping each other become more of who they are. And remembering that takes you back to your core, and you can kind of start fresh from there as to what the real issues are.
But do we lose?
A brilliant love coach.
I know.
Yes,
Love coach.
Darryl, the interdimensional love coach. But
I
but
have
Yes.
You are
Our
the
coach.
first interdimensional love coach.
right. But do we lose that? I'm just asking Darryl and maybe everyone, do we lose that as we go into this ET because they're less physical? No.
Not necessarily, no.
Okay.
Again, remember, whatever does replace it is going to probably feel 10 times more powerful anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you say, Henry? How do you know that, Henrietta? You shake. I mean, what's your
Well,
feeling?
just with
You just know.
no, with my experience, it's like that he's talking about these higher frequencies, or these kind of like, you know, vast shining intelligences that I've encountered, which is different to a human, but it's enriched my human relationships, you know. And what I love that we use that word compassion and empathy, you know, and that Trish was saying that this is part of her sort of generation. I feel like this year, this pandemic year, what you, Scott and Trish were talking about, and Darryl, you know, between couples and what they do. I mean, that's the little micro, but then when that becomes macro and that starts moving in how we organize societies, you know, that's when it gets really exciting because, right? Because I really think that if we don't know how to do it on the, you know, between two people, then how can we possibly talk about bigger systems,
right,
with the knowledge of that? So it's really important to fine tune. But in my personal experience, I'm just going to say, I don't usually say this publicly, but I do believe that the contacts that I've had with these intelligences, what, you know, forms have really, they are informing me of how to be a more understanding, loving human being with others. You know, judgment seems to kind of just, it's not like I'm consciously deciding not to judge people. I just kind of don't anymore.
It doesn't exist on that level. It does.
Right, exactly. It's just there's no function for it, because it doesn't, it just doesn't make any sense, because to allow whatever's happening.
Yeah, as Bashar says, in some sense, it's you can also look at that just as physics. You can't experience what you're not the vibration of. You only experience what you are the frequency of. And on higher frequencies, certain experiences just don't go hand in hand with it, like judgment and, you know, self-appreciation, things like that, just don't exist in that level of joy.
Well,
I really liked what Darryl was talking about when you do refer to quantum physics and the entanglement theory, you know, and how particles respond, or you know, I do, and how you then tie that to sort of the human mind, the kind of mind linking, and it's not reading somebody else's thoughts, but you are actually just thinking the same thoughts at exactly the same time. Right. And I think the more that we all start doing that, which I believe we will, then, you know, the whole game changes, because it just becomes so much faster. We don't need to have to work with our minds so hard to wonder about things, right?
It's not really designed to do that anyway. It's being overtaxed in a lot of ways.
Exactly.
Not really letting the physical mind do the job that it's designed to do, which really is almost nothing more than just keeping us focused in a physical experience. It's not supposed to really control what's happening. It's supposed to experience what's happening.
Exactly.
So Bashar's kind of likened that sometimes to a diving mask. Like when you go under the water, things can be murky, but if you put the diving mask on, you can see more clearly. But you never expect the diving mask to tell you where to go or what to look at. So that's the higher mind, that's the higher self guiding us through life. And the diving mask is not supposed to be burdened with the idea of figuring out exactly what we're supposed to be looking at. That's our choice. And the diving mask helps us see it, because physical reality, in a sense, is just an expression in our consciousness. It's not really out there. So we focus our consciousness in a way to have a clear experience of something, of a pattern that's going on within our consciousness. And so the idea really of death is nothing more than taking off the diving mask and seeing more broadly.
Well, yeah, what Henrietta was getting to in that, on what you just said, is that somehow when I was putting together this book, I realized that really making contact is about making us more human.
Yes.
Somehow feeling the essence of who we are. I mean, I like Trisha and Scott's work, and it's about the relationship, but at some point that has to be transcendent in a way. Of course, you have to have good communication, but as we go to this next level, something else comes into play that's not just about the human, the drama, and but what is that next? How does Bashar interact with, I mean, from what you know, what's his relationships like? And from what you know of
They're always going to be joyful no matter what. But the thing of it is that's important to them is they never impose a particular format on a relationship when it occurs. No matter how strong an attraction may be from their point of view, they let the relationship show them what it actually is. They don't put it in a box and say, well, because the attraction is so strong, it must mean this or it must mean that. They just let it unfold naturally, knowing that it's got to be there for a reason. And they just go along following as it unfolds naturally.
For however long that takes, and then
however long or short or whatever way it formats itself.
Right.
Because they know that they're trusting that their synchronicity allows it to unfold exactly as it needs to, that's relevant for them.
I mean, I think Scott might be interested in the fact that there is no marriage on Bashar's world, right? There's no...
Not in the formal sense, no. They sort of consider everyone in the civilization to be in one marriage. And all of the components are finding their own way in it. But they, again, they operate on what he calls pure synchronism. They just simply know they're going to be exactly where they need to be, exactly when they need to be there, interacting with exactly who they need to interact with in perfect timing, getting out of it exactly what they needed at that moment. And there's no planning in that sense. There's no imposition of structure on it. They allow the structure to exist naturally within the synchronicity, because to them, synchronicity is actually an organizing principle. And therefore, they're just... You could say they're surrendering to the flow, because their flow knows exactly where they need to go. So to them, surrendering is not giving up control. It's surrendering to the control that's already built into existence.
So I have a question for that. In their reality, it sounds like they are not in polarity. It's not a polarized reality.
They always have the choice. They always, as we said earlier, because they're expanded, they always know that the negative side is a choice, but they don't invalidate it, and therefore they simply choose what they prefer as opposed to choosing what they don't prefer. It's coming from a neutral place in that, a balanced place in that recognition. It's sort of like, yeah, I'm sorry. It's sort of like he's used the yin yang symbol as an analogy, because you know that, one side is predominantly white, one side is predominantly black, but on each side there is a dot of the opposite. So you always have access to the other side, but you can also choose what you prefer without invalidating what you don't prefer.
Okay, that answered the question I had. Yeah.
What I'm hearing is that it's a place, like the joy is a place of just what we might consider trusting, being in a extended space of trust.
Yes, like trusting a particular thing, because he's basically saying there's no time when we're not trusting something. To be true. There's no such thing as actually lacking trust. There is, however, a trust in lack.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they don't trust in lack. They use their trust in whatever direction that they prefer to use it in. So it's really not a matter of anyone having to learn to trust. It's about, what are you putting your trust in? That makes sense.
So does that make it then kind of a mistake-free, judgment-free, blame, shame-free environment?
Completely. Because they're always learning, no matter what happens. Again, he's saying, even if something manifests you don't prefer, you have to know it's there for a reason. So by staying in the balanced state, in a positive state, you get to decide why it's there and how to use it to your benefit, rather than getting caught up in, oh no, something just went wrong, which he's basically saying, well, you're now defining it as something that's going to be experienced as something that went wrong, because that's the way you're defining it. So if you say, well, I know it's here for a reason, he says, if nothing else, on the simplest possible level, sometimes manifesting something you don't prefer makes it clearer by contrast what you do prefer. And that's a positive way to use what you don't prefer.
Exactly. So in these 38 years that you've been in association, I'm sure you have changed and evolved. Are you getting closer to the vibration where you'll be able to actually meet Bashar? Because I went actually,
I think so, but that's not really the important thing.
all
The
right.
important thing is to be in a vibration where I become my version of Bashar on Earth.
And do you have an idea what that looks like? I mean, do you
I
have?
have some idea, because the fact that I can talk about these concepts myself means I
Right.
maybe learn something.
I think you.
I think it's a really beautiful version of Bashar right here.
Yes, you are. You are a version of
Yes.
Bashar.
It's
I
funny
mean,
too.
that's what I've always thought. I mean, going way back, I've always thought that Bashar is just a multidimensional aspect of Darryl.
Yeah, we're all connected. And, you know, I mean, now the synchronicity in my life has gotten to the point where if for some reason somebody recognizes me on the street or in a store, they won't call me Darryl. They'll go Bashar, and I'll answer to it, because that's the reflection of I'm becoming more like him, to me anyway.
You know, when I was interviewing him and you at the house, I said, wow, I'm really feeling a lot of energy. I said this to Bashar off the body. I said, can you increase that? And he goes, no, we cannot. The channel will be blown out. And I said, oh, sorry. He was kind of very forceful in that, but I was feeling so good in that energy.
Yeah. No, I mean, he's actually said that even at this point, I mean, I think I started out when I wasn't really familiar with the energy and I didn't know exactly how to handle it. You know, he said, you know, maybe you were getting about 5% of Bashar's energy. Now it's up to maybe 15, maybe 20%. But that tells you how much more there is of him than is capable of coming through at this particular point, because we still have our framework. We still have our understanding of our identity to process and to go through. And it's got to make sense the way his thoughts are translated through my brain into our language. So going a little bit too far or too fast doesn't allow the channel themselves to go through the process they need to go through to also integrate a lot of that energy and those ideas for themselves, as well as whatever is being shared with the public that Bashar may be communicating with.
Well, I think that's happening on a planetary level. This past year has definitely been a shift into another reality. No, it really has. And Corona means crown. And I think we are shifting as human beings and we're raising our vibration. I mean, it has been tragic but as a civilization, something different is being born. And
someone turned the computer off on the whole planet. They were like, oh, we're just gonna reboot, and then like stopped everything, and now it's like
So Ram Dass, when he was stroked, wrote a book about it, and he called it Fierce Grace. And Ram Dass was somebody that I knew personally and was a very big influence on me. And I think it's the same with COVID. It's fierce grace. And really, if you think about how much humankind needs to be redirected, it's still an extraordinarily gentle redirection. I mean, you know, it really is. I mean, my empathy for people who have died and people who are sick. Obviously, there's empathy there, but it's still a gentle worldwide wake-up call to slow down, tune in. And I think most people recognize we're never going to go back to normal, because normal was not healthy. Normal was not sustainable. Normal was very dangerous.
Right. Yeah. Bashar is saying now it's not really about being normal. It's about learning to be natural.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Right.
That one.
So making contact on a planetary level, and I just love the fact that Bashar is a first contact specialist,
Mhm.
and it is this shift in vibration and consciousness and the limited identification that we have with these lower values, the non-compassion, the the war, the hate, and so is there a time, I know he's probably talked about a time frame where, and it keeps changing, but I'm just curious what he said lately.
Yeah, I mean, things have definitely shifted again. And he's still saying the window is generally the same for the beginning of open contact. Now, that doesn't mean UFOs land all over the planet in the same day. But it means that somewhere between, he's saying 2033, maybe 2025 or 2023 and 2040 is the basic window he senses at this point. But it will begin slowly. It will begin here and there sporadically. We'll get more information, more awareness. People will be more willing to recognize there are other beings. Even if we, in our own scientific probes, discover even any other form of life, even a microbe on another planet, and we now know that life can happen on other planets, he said, that would change your mentality to the point where you would suddenly be much more open to the idea that there is extraterrestrial intelligence. So it takes a number of steps, and there will be steps within that window. But for now, that's basically what he's still saying the window is for the general beginning of the awareness of open contact and its ultimate conclusion of face-to-face encounters.
Well, a lot of people are, of course, having contact, and there was just an article in the New York Times about how people are seeing more ships in the sky because they're looking at the sky. And that reminds me, I am doing a book release party where we're going to do a CE5. Mark Sims is going to take us out to the desert in Sedona. I hope you can make it, Henrietta. And
Me too.
we're going to call them in. And then there's a little banner, and we're going to have Travis Walton there, JJ and Desiree Hurtak, Bridget Nielsen, who's the mother of lots of hybrid children. We're having Mark there, and Peter Sterling, some of the friends from Saturday Night Alive. And we're going to go out into the desert after this little talk by these people and call them in. And then, Scott, we're doing a show on May 4th, which is the release date of the book, the official release date. May the 4th be with you, we're calling it.
Well, that's Star Wars Day.
That is Star Wars Days, but it's also, I'm saying, Universal Making Contact Day. It is the day we are calling them in, and Bashar might have to adjust his frequency, his predictions too. But do you have anything to say about that show coming up, Scott?
Well, I just want to invite everybody. We'll be promoting it. It's going to be broadcast. If you're watching us on Facebook, it'll be on whatever New Realities or Love Coach Academy or Trisha Wright's page, all the different pages we go out on. We'll probably have a sign network carry it. And it's going to be fun. And just to be clear, actually, Mark, on both Sunday the 2nd live and on May 4th, for us, is going to do a CE6. Just to clarify, Mark.
Right.
CE6.
The 5,
so,
not the 6. We're going another level than the 5.
Level. But, while Darryl is here, there's something you had mentioned, given that Alan is in Sedona, and I'm actually thinking of going to Sedona to be with you for May the 4th be with you. Depends on if you come with me. Sedona, I think we all know, portals, amazing things. People have experiences there. Why is that, Darryl? What's the relationship between places like Sedona where magic happens?
Well, what Bashar's talked about is, it's a very powerful energy vortex. It's a dimensional gate. There are many of them around the planet. It's part of the natural way that energy expresses itself in any physical form. In a sense, you could say the chakras in our own body are our body's vortexes, but the planet has vortexes and dimensional portals too. And Sedona is a very powerful one that Bashar has likened unto an amplifying mirror. In other words, what you bring into that vortex, positive or negative, gets amplified so that you can deal with whatever it is. And it's connected to many other vortices that are nearby in very specific ways. So that's why his ship is above Sedona, above Bell Rock, because he's helping add his energy to that vortex to help our transitions in that portal go a little bit more smoothly than they otherwise might go.
I didn't even know that his ship was above.
Oh, yes. That's why I'm here.
I didn't know that either.
No, I'm here to because, and he's here because, is this going to be a ground for a kind of first contact experience to take place, you feel like
I believe it's one of the places he said has a high degree of probability for some of the early open contacts to occur, as well as other things in the near future with regard to the hybrids.
There's one more question I want to ask you, Darryl, but concerning your chapter. In your chapter, you gave us this diagram. Do you see that on the screen there?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Can you? So Prince figure 1 is the one above, expressing human mathematics. Figure 2 is principle in Sassani geometrics. Can you tell us what that means a little bit there?
Yeah, Sassani is the name of his people. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that they don't have mathematical equations in the way that we do. So this particular geometric form is identical in their reality to the mathematics that we express with regard to a particular physics principle as an example. So in other words, the idea being that, there's kind of an exclusion principle where you can only measure momentum or you can measure location, one or the other. You can't measure both at the same time. And so this is a geometric expression in their reality of that idea, where you have the base of the tetrahedron represents the XYZ of physical reality or location, and the apex represents time. And therefore, if in any given plane you're taking a measurement, you can only measure 3 factors. You either have all 3 factors of space and none of time, no understanding of momentum, or you have 2 factors, or you have the entire understanding of momentum, but only 2 factors of space, and therefore you don't have the exact location. So he was just explaining that geometry is what they use to express a lot of these physics principles, whereas we use actual mathematical equations, and he's just showing us the difference between the 2 systems.
So when they look at that geometry, they get everything that we're trying to work out in formula.
Totally.
That and one more question about time, because I've dialogued with Bashar about time. He says there's really no such thing as time travel as we understand it. Can you explain that a little bit?
Do we have time for me to explain that?
Well, what's time travel then? Okay. We have as much.
Yes. I mean, he's basically saying it's not the science fiction concept that we think it is. You don't actually ever go back into your own past. You are actually shifting into a parallel reality that might look very similar. And the way he sort of demonstrates that that is true, he says, look at this simple example. Let's say you're 10 years old and somebody takes a photograph of you. Okay, take that photo, place it on a table. Now you're 30 years old and you invent a time machine. And now you're going to say, I'm going to go back and visit my 10-year-old self and take a picture. So you get in the machine, you go back, you find the kid that supposedly looks like you at 10, and you take another photo. Now you put that photo next to the other one. But what he's saying is, look, it's not like you changed the original photo. The kid is still in the photo, the first photo, by himself. That photo exists and will always exist. That's its own reality. Now you have a second photo with you as a 30-year-old standing next to a 10-year-old, but that's not you as a 10-year-old. It's a 10-year-old in a parallel reality, and you've just become part of his history, but you haven't changed your own past or history at all, because the 2 photos exist side by side and always will. They're different realities. So you can seemingly travel back to what appears to be the past, but you're not going to be able to change anything in your present by altering anything in that past. All you're doing is creating history in a parallel reality.
What I get from that is there's only this live moment. It cannot be duplicated. It cannot be revisited in this.
Yeah, it's kind of what the Zen philosophy says when it says you can't step into the same river twice. Everything is always changing, always fluctuating. To Bashar, that's what he calls the 5th law. Change is the only constant. The only things that don't change are the other 4 laws. So the idea is that everything that happens is a new reality. Literally billions of times a second, we are shifting, 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 and creating what appears to be the side effect of time and change and a timeline. But basically, a timeline is actually made up, according to him, of literally billions of other parallel realities. It gets a little complex, and there's an easier way to dive into that in more detail, but that's the basic gist.
I thought your photograph analogy was great.
Yes.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
It was very clear.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, he talks about a lot of, I wanted to mention, he's doing a streaming tomorrow.
Oh, yes. I wanted you to mention that.
Right, so how do we find it? Yeah, so is
Yeah.
there a URL for me to pull up?
Yeah, you can just go, anyone can go to bashar.org, BASHAR.org, to find out anything that we're doing with regard to live events or anything like that. And we do have one tomorrow that is called A Step Along the Way. And Bashar is basically describing how your passion and synchronicity work together to create your path in life.
Wow. That's April 24th. Look up, is it basharcommunications.org? There it is.
Bashar.org.
Right.
Mhm.
And there it is. And so just right, if you just immediately go below, buy a streaming ticket.
Right.
And that looks fantastic. Wow.
I have to say the past shows have been really incredible. The Conundrum, what was the other one? Passing Through the Eye of the Needle. These have been really great teaching devices or tools to learning to cope with this changing time. I mean, Bashar.
And there's a indication right there of a book that Bashar dictated to me called The Masters of Limitation.
That's us. That's us, Scott.
For us, because he's saying we're basically going from being the masters of limitation to being the masters of limitation. And it's an ET's observations of Earth. So it's an interesting book that he dictated. So if anyone's interested in that, they can certainly access it there.
Absolutely. Somebody please go to Bashar. It's easy. BASHAR.org.
Correct.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And 38 years of teaching are out there. Just fantastic. What's that?
Let me just ask a couple questions while I'm on the website. Tell us about your novel, Darryl.
Another entity that I've channeled is a being 700 years in the future on Earth called Willa Hilla Chrissing, who's a hybrid. And so she's talked about her life 700 years in the future, what's going on Earth at that time from her perspective. But I've written 2 science fiction novels using her as the protagonist. And while maybe 5 to 10% of the information in the book, in the story, is based on her reality, really, the rest of it is a sci-fi novel, but it contains a lot of concepts that she talks about, that Bashar talks about, in terms of her path in growth, in going through the different stages of what they call the 5 stages of mastery, in relating to nature, in going beyond, and all of that. So, I had fun, and I'm still writing it. It's actually the second book of 5 that now exists, and so I'm still writing that story. But it's a fun thing for me to do. It's part of my expression of my passion. So I hope anyone in sci-fi novels will find it enjoyable.
It's reminding me my 2 favorite channel 3, Lazarus, you, and earlier channel Jane Roberts. And Jane did a similar thing. There were the Seth books, and then there was the Education of Oversoul 7, which was, and I was thinking of that, it's a little bit similar. So some people can relate easier to reading a fictional story that imbues the wisdom and imbues the understanding of multidimensional reality.
Yeah, because one of the things that Bashar's also talked about is story structure and how important it is, because he's basically saying story structure is not something that we invented, it's something we discovered within ourselves. It's actually built into our psyche. And that's why when you tell a story, you retain the information more strongly. And that's why stories last for thousands of years, because they're hitting all those chords within our psyche that need to be hit, that need to be plucked in order for us to retain the information we're being told in the story. It's the way we absorb information more easily than some kind of just rote lesson.
But you're also kind of fulfilling what I feel and I come sometimes put this out there. Okay, let's say the ETs land. Let's say we have free energy. Let's say everyone's living in abundance and joy. I mean, that's a bit of fantasy, but it's possible. What do we do then? What are we here for? And my theory or thesis is we're here to be creative. We're here to bring more possibility. And you know that, Henrietta, because you're an artist and a poet. So that's our ultimate goal. We're not waiting for the ETs to land, or it's like we are the creative force of you. That's our true destiny.
We are creators. We are reflections of creation. And yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
We can be ourselves.
Mhm. And that's probably where you've had a lot of, besides channeling. I mean, of course, you're not there really, but when you've done your creative projects, right? Isn't that the most fun?
It's all fun. I wouldn't do it if it wasn't. So yeah, making movies, writing books, doing the channeling, it's all different expressions of my passion.
Is that's something you really, I know we're going to wrap up soon, but is if you could, if we don't have to, but you know, I was just being conscious of people's time, but is that something that's new for you? Did you come from this place where, like most humans, you weren't doing your joy? And then
No.
you never.
I guess just because of the preparation that was necessary in growing up, that would prepare me to be the channel for Bashar, which I guess is the product of an agreement prior to this life. I have been drawing ever since I could pick up a pencil. And I have, except, you know, maybe for 1 6-month period in my life, did something that wasn't necessarily a reflection as a job of my particular passion. And I stopped, I left. So I have simply always been the kind of person that's been driven only to do those things that are reflective of my passion. And that's just the way I'm built. But it's always sustained me, it's always supported me, and it can support anyone who moves in that direction, because I know that from experience.
Right. And that's the world I envision. And that's the world Bashar lives in, right? That
Absolutely.
we imagine if everyone was doing their passion and their joy and that's really, I think, what these beings are waiting for us to do.
Yes.
Well, they're not waiting, but they certainly know we have that capacity.
You're smarter than that.
Yeah, they don't wait around for us. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, when Bashar comes through, I can certainly feel what he feels. And I think one of the most things, and going to what Trish said about compassion, they're so compassionate toward us because they know what we're capable of. And to see us deny ourselves that is just it doesn't really do this, but the only expression I can say is it breaks their hearts, because it's just like, we know what you can be, we know what you are, and
how do we get to do that? How do we get to, I mean, what
acting on your passion? Because you see, the passion, here's the why. What we experience as passion, excitement, love, creativity, attraction, curiosity, is actually the way our higher mind's messages to us translate in our physical body. It's an energy communication our bodies translate as passion. So when we feel something contains more passion than anything else, that's our higher mind saying, this is you, act on it, this is you.
Yeah.
So when we act on it, we are responding to the higher mind. We're saying, yes, I heard you. But we have to respond in the language of physical reality. And the language of physical reality isn't words, it's actions. When we demonstrate that we understand that our passion is who we are, then the higher mind says, great, you heard me. I will give you more opportunities to act on your passion. But if you're not going to act on it, why should I give you more opportunities when you haven't even acted on what I've given you?
Wow.
And that's purely
Right.
psychology as well. That's like
Yeah.
literally your brain waves. I do have a question.
Yeah.
Do you think that the higher beings are more compassionate because they realize how heavy matter is to move? Like
In
all
some
of this
senses,
is
they
heavy.
understand it. They understand the difference in the densities, and they know that's why Bashar is saying you're a graduating master class. You have chosen to experience great challenges, and those challenges make you stronger as a being, as a soul, as a spirit. So yeah, they understand that. They completely understand that.
So, and when we follow our passion, we're actually raising our vibration. We're actually
Yes. And
it's
when
a-
you follow your passion, when you are in that state, you are in a channeling state. It's the gamma state in the between 40 and 100 cycles per second. And anytime you act on something you love to do, suddenly the passage of time doesn't seem to exist and all of that. You are in the channeling zone, and you actually can connect to more things, bring more things through. You can synthesize information more efficiently. You can make connections to things you didn't see before. It's a profoundly different state of being. And that's why he encourages us all to act on our passion, because it puts us right in that wavelength where we are way more capable of receiving communications from higher beings, getting more inspiration, and making those aware connections that we can make.
Is that why things like manifest easier? It's because you're now in the flow, the
You're
fluid.
in the flow of yourself. So he's basically saying, go with the current. Your current knows where you need to be. Don't resist. Don't swim upstream. Just go with the flow.
Yeah.
Henrietta, what were you going to say? Henrietta.
Well, I was just going to say that I think it's very interesting from talking to a lot of people this year is that people are discovering a lot more passions. You know, it's not just one thing. There's like a multitude of things. And then I personally have the sense that a lot of this new kind of discovery of, you know, allowing yourself, as Darryl was saying, to act on, you know, like, wow, I actually love that, or I'm really good at it, and this is creating a whole new feeling for me, and then connecting with others and then creating in groups. You know, I really see it as a sort of hive mind thing that's being built at the moment. Do you know what I'm saying? Like there's a lot more.
And or a hive heart.
A hive heart, yes, a hive heart.
But they
meaning that, you know, there's a lot of because saying to act on your passion, it's like, well, what is that? You know, for me, I've discovered a lot of new ones, which is like, wow, you know, this seems to be a metaphor for something else. Personally, I've discovered trapeze, which I never in a million years thought I would discover. And you know, I'm like half a century old, and I'm flying, but that's a metaphor.
You're still a young kid.
Yeah, I'm still a young kid, but just you know, there are a multitude of passions, and that's the joy, because a lot of people think that it's just got to be one thing or two things, you know.
No, and also people think it needs to be big things. It doesn't.
Exactly.
The way you start that ball rolling is just look around for any normal thing that you would typically be able to do. Bashar saying, if you don't have a big project, if you don't have a life-spanning career that makes you passionate, just look around and take a walk, read a book, talk to a friend.
Exactly.
If that is the most exciting thing in that moment you're capable of doing, do it, and then keep doing that, because it will snowball into something bigger.
So
totally.
If we're all following our passion, I was just wondering, we won't even notice when the ETs show up, because
you'll notice. You'll notice.
Well, that's a passion for me. What were you saying, Trish?
Yes,
Are
that's Alan's passion.
My 25 minutes of TikToking that delights me to no end is just going to like spawn into more enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
I know the answer to that.
Absolutely.
As long as we know the difference within ourselves between our passion or our excitement and anxiety, then we'll be self-correcting. We just have to be honest within ourselves about why we choose to do what we do, to know the difference.
I've told people that just follow your passion, because I do believe in it. And then somebody said, well, I'm just going to do drugs all day. I said, that is not your passion. That's an avoidance.
Exactly.
And so people don't really even know the essence of passion.
Right. Well, again, that's why it's important to explain things in detail over a time, so people can really learn what is meant by these concepts. I mean, that's the one thing I really appreciate about Bashar, is he takes, you know, metaphysical concepts that are often left in a sort of a blue sky way. It's like, well, follow your bliss. Well, why? What does that mean? What's that going to do? And he breaks it down literally into a physical toolkit. This is why it works. This is how you apply it. This is the effect you're going to get, because he understands, like you said, we're physical beings. He has compassion, that we need a particular toolkit that our minds can also wrap around in order to understand why it's important to use these things and how they can actually change our lives for the better. You can't just leave it in some sort of vague, nebulous, new age sort of statement, because like you said,
Exactly.
nobody knows what that means necessarily.
Exactly.
So,
So,
yeah.
my one of my questions is that if Bashar is living at this ultimate place, let's say this passion, joy, interconnection, where is he going? What is, he says he's going to the next level. What
There's
would
always more. There's always more.
more of what? More if you're I
More
mean,
discovery of yourself, because the idea is he's not in an ultimate place. He's in an ultimate place in one context. There's always more. It never ends. We may not even be able to imagine what the next level is.
right.
But when you get there, you'll get it.
Yeah.
You'll get
Yeah.
it.
There is a next level beyond your total joy and passion, I suppose, right? And
It doesn't mean that you'd stop having joy or passion. It just
Right.
means expressed in different ways for different
right.
purposes. In different,
Yeah.
for a crude example is he's saying, look, you could, in this physical reality, let go of every possible negative belief that you may have held on to. Once you do that, it doesn't necessarily mean you're done. You can now start letting go of things that are simply not relevant for you.
Mm,
They don't have to be negative. They just simply may no longer be relevant.
Yeah.
And you
right.
streamline yourself. You give yourself a different kind of experience by stripping away those things that you simply no longer need to really be who you are in this context. When you go to the next level, there are many other options that may be available that we may know nothing about.
Mm. I'm just
So-
curious, Scott. Oh, go ahead. I was just
There's
getting,
one who
yeah,
who is
chat. I was just wondering about the chat. Yeah.
Celeste, I hope it's Celeste, or it might be Celeste, is intention is creation. And what I love about that piece is that when you're in your, I heard that you follow your bliss for a really long time. And
Mhm.
I did go off on all the crazy pathways, and I was like, oh, that wasn't it. But what I found, and I love what you're saying, Darryl, is finding your delight and your passion is going to continue to lead you and find you into, again, the next, not best thing, but it's gonna teach you and your body and your neurology the way to be in its highest vibration.
Guiding, it's an self-expanding, self-guiding, self-perpetuating system. It's all built in. It leaves absolutely nothing out that's relevant for you.
And that's why I found Love Coach Academy.
Yeah.
And that's doing the work that I'm doing right now on dissolving codependency. It is, I know that sounds really interesting, but that's my bliss.
Yeah.
Yes,
My
yes,
bliss.
absolutely fine.
And it is neurological. It is cellular. I mean, it's energetic and vibrational, and it's all in our heads in a way. I mean, it's all, Mark Twain said, most of the problems in my life I never had. So it's like, it's like,
Exactly.
Love it's in my body and yours too.
right.
I want to honor people's time and wrap
Yes.
us up. I do want to thank all the comments that came in. I just saw we have over 25 comments on one of our Facebook pages. So thank you, George. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Jay Mayer, Celeste, Chino, Jan, Deborah Haviland. Thank you all very much for your comments, and they're beautiful. Also want to thank Wanda, who wrote, and I like Wanda's quote right here in our little Zoom room. She says, let's face it, it's easier to row downstream than upstream. If we could remember that, and that's Wanda in Irving, Dallas County. I always
Yes.
appreciate, just along those lines about rowing, that isn't it amazing that that famous nursery rhyme sums up reality? Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream.
Yes.
Merrily, 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 for life is but a dream.
Mm.
All true.
It's all true. It's like the meaning, the whole, everything you need to know is in that nursery rhyme.
That's right.
That's
So delighted to have this conversation with you. All three.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for providing this opportunity for all of us, and for meeting Henrietta. A pleasure. Delightful.
Mhm.
Yes,
Well,
you too, Darryl.
I
really.
want to, yes,
there
I just, go ahead, Scott.
I want us to put out there, like if people have fallen in love with you, which some of them probably have, how do they reach you? How do they get on the trapeze with you? How do they read what
Yes.
you write?
Who are you asking, Henrietta?
I'm asking Henrietta.
Or
Oh,
Well,
I thought you were
Daryl's on a
asking-
trapeze too. He's swinging. Go ahead. Go.
You can find me at vineproductions.com. I'll put it here.
VYNE Productions.
I'm just going to put my
Yes.
Put it in the chat box and then I'll pull it up
email.
on the internet.
Yeah.
I
Because
also-
I
Mhm.
yeah.
No, go ahead.
I just love to, well, I was going to say, right now I'm really interested in hearing about anybody's contact experiences with other intelligences, beings. I'm just really all about having conversations and chatting about it and helping and pooling our experiences. Alan and I are doing that a lot. So
Yeah, every Wednesday I do an ET roundtable with people sharing their experience, but also their intellectual, not in a negative way, but their intellectual understanding of the phenomena. And Darryl, you're welcome on anytime, but I know you're, absolutely.
busy.
And I just want to read some chats in the YouTube comments that I get on my YouTube, where I broadcast Scott 3 times a week, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And he says, we're all becoming masters. Can you imagine? And fun journey, amazing insights, and just some of the highlights. Some people, it's like this, and what we're saying here today is like how to become a master of our destiny and our reality, and welcome the others. I think when we really own that limitation, we start to welcome more unlimited possibilities into our reality. And that's exciting. I mean, people say, are you afraid of the aliens? I said, I'm more afraid of other human beings than I am of aliens, right? That's what people project, what they know onto the unknown. And I wrote this book edited it and compiled it because I think we're about to enter an amazing new reality that cannot even be imagined. And it's full of excitement and possibility and unlimited knowledge in a way. I just love knowledge. So you can get this book on Amazon, go to Making Contact. It's going to be released May 4th, but you can pre-order it. And I've really enjoyed our conversation thank you for taking the time, Darryl, and Scott. Thanks for And
thank you, Scott and Trish. It was so lovely to meet you.
Henrietta, I'm going to your website. We actually found you.
Oh, good.
Fine. Imagination.
Oh yeah, there you go. Imagination Evolution. That's it.
It is.
That came to me, and actually, I believe that was before my whole. That was before my world kind of really hugely expanded. But it was like, what is the way to evolve? It's just our imagination. What is that? I don't know. But we're creative beings. That's all I know.
I love your Gothic vibe.
So people.
Well,
can
yes,
yes.
I do. It's the red velvet theatre curtain, because it is. We're all here. Not performing, but we're all having a huge adventure, which is why I love theatre and film and storytelling, as you say. I love what you said about storytelling, being that's the way the psyche retains information. That's really interesting.
What were you going to say, Scott? You were going to say?
I want people to know how to reach her. So it's VYNE, Vine, spelled VYNE, productions.com. And then a little thing will come up, join our mailing list. So that's a way and I just did it. So that's the way that you can connect with Henrietta. Absolutely. And I want to
so lovely to meet you all.
Do you know Zenka Caro? Do you know Zenka?
We just met her.
I just met her. Yeah, I
Because
just met
there's a
her
good
the other.
person to collaborate with in terms of.
Yes.
She's been doing research and collecting stories for quite some time. So
I just met her on Wednesday night on Alan's ET roundtable, and I love what she was, because that's what I've just been doing that, like, I'm old fashioned. I just write things in books, but she's actually assembled a website with people.
She's a lot of fun. So
she's fantastic. She's fantastic.
She'll help you with connecting to other people. She's really good at that.
And thank you, Scott, for doing this show. And I'll just put that book up. I should actually put the back cover up, but for anyone who doesn't believe anything we've been saying, if they want a nice preparation for understanding the phenomena, this is a sequential development of thinking as we go from the phenomena into the consciousness, into people like Darryl who have been interacting with these beings for 30 something years, into who we really are. I think it's a good way to understand the depth of the human being, because we've never been told who we really are. We've been really limited by our education, our religion, our politics, our media. And what I feel the ETs represent as a symbol and as a possibility is to know more of ourselves, is to expand. And I think this is what maybe Bashar is waiting for us to grow up. Is that what they're waiting to make this appearance?
Again, they're
Not waiting.
What's that? They're not.
and they're not waiting.
They're not waiting.
Well, what do they?
Yeah.
They consider us to be family, and therefore they're willing.
Yes.
But we have to make our own decisions. That's how you grow up.
Exactly.
and learning to make
Exactly.
your own decisions.
Right. So we have to.
I always love it when a lot of my very skeptical friends who've been skeptical about things I've been saying for years suddenly have an experience of their own, and everything changes on a dime.
Mhm.
So I think the experience thing is
Yeah, people have.
wonderful. You can read. But a book like this, what I feel Alan's book did for me, and can do for a lot of people who are still ultra skeptical, is it's really like I said about this book that I love of Sri Aurobindo's. It has a sort of transmission quality where you're not just reading words and processing them in your brain. You're experiencing something, allowing yourself to go, well, maybe, and then that whole maybe opens the possibilities for experiences like you yourself had all those years ago, Darryl.
Yeah, and I think also what's one thing that's very important that Bashar talks about in terms of people sharing information with others to give them an opportunity to look at things in a different way. He's very pragmatic about that idea, because he's basically saying, look, all you can do is give them the option. That's how you help, because it's not up to you to decide when or where or how they should apply it in their lives, because you don't know what their path really is. So the way he sort of expresses it is, by all means, when it seems appropriate, share, give, help, make people aware that there is an opportunity or an option to look at things in a different way. But what they do with that information is none of your business.
Right.
Exactly.
And you can only grow as fast as your perspective or your perception shift.
Exactly. Everyone has a different path, and you don't know what theirs is. So at least they have encountered something that can give them an option. And who knows, maybe 10, 20 years down the road, they go, oh yeah, I remember that. And now that makes sense. So, it doesn't have to be someone changing immediately when they get the information. They don't have to change at all, because again, they're on their path. And like I said earlier, everyone is an eternal, indestructible, infinite being. What's your hurry?
Right. It's not, and I also love the fact that Bashar says it's not the circumstances that matter, it's the state of consciousness.
It's what you do with the circumstances that matter.
Right. Right.
Because
and that's something
be used in any way possible,
Yeah, I always remember that if something gets me upset, like something didn't, and it's like, oh,
right.
Well,
but that's the fourth part of the formula. Remain in a positive state. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get a benefit out of whatever happened.
Right.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Well,
I'm going to wrap this up.
Thank you.
So again, going to Gallery View to get more about Darryl, and there's a lot, his movies, his books, his channelings. Go to Bashar, BASHAR.org. Everyone go to Amazon and pre-order this wonderful book, Making Contact, or come to Sedona and be there between May 2nd and May 4th. We're going to have big events on May 2nd, a big event on May 4th. The book.
Yes.
And hopefully, if we're lucky, a sighting or
Right.
2 or 3.
And then this
Also,
is
just want to remind everybody that Trish has an amazing show. She does every Thursday morning. It's called Self Love Show. It's with her partner Dawn, and they are delightful. And they always have amazing guests. And it's a great reminder. It's kind of like, The View for spiritual people.
Oh my gosh, you should watch this next coming Thursday. We
What do you
have
got?
Lola Prickett of Empathology. Oh my gosh, she's amazing. Wow. Yeah, like if you want some more empathy, show up there.
So Self-Love Show every Thursday morning at 10 o'clock Pacific time. And then finally, I do want to just invite people, of course, the big show that I work on is Saturday Night Alive for the Global Peace Tribe. It's an amazing inspirational variety show. And tomorrow night, we're tackling death and dying with a focus on people who have had near-death experiences.
Ooh, cool.
My good friend Daniel Brinkley, who I first put on television in 1994, on the other side, will be with us. Anita Morjani, Dr. Eben Alexander, Michael Tamura, Lisa Gar, really remarkable people who have had amazing experiences. And as always, we've got great music. Kristen Hoffman, if you have not experienced Kristen Hoffman, she is exquisite. She's this remarkable Juilliard trained voice that's learned how to loop and creates these remarkable loops of harmonies. And she's going to take us on a journey to the other side. We've got Benjamin Carroll doing his crystal bowls and magic with Sean Jay. Oh, and also music with an amazing musician, Sri Kala. Join us tomorrow night from 6 to 9 p.m. for Saturday Night Live for the Global Peace Tribe. You can register at globalpeacetribe.com or watch live on Facebook.
And May 29th, we're doing another UFO show on Saturday Night Live with some of our favorite ET visitors.
She's going to be with us, and Whitley Strieber, and of course Alan, and if lucky, maybe a pre-recorded segment with Darryl.
We'll see.
So
He didn't say.
I said if we're lucky. I said if we're lucky.
Okay.
Just-
If we're,
No pressure.
well,
I'm
we're lucky to have him right now because
I'm following my passion, and my passion is just you got to go for it, right?
yeah.
Anyway, thank you, Darryl, for your time.
you.
Oh, like thank all of you so much. All of you, please have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
See you tomorrow.
All right, see
Yes.
y'all. Take care, everybody.
April 24th, Bashar. Look for him and Darryl and everyone. Thanks, Scott, for doing this. I really appreciate it. And everyone who's watching on YouTube, Facebook, buy the book.
Share it out. Share it out, everybody. Okay, share it. Put it on your wall. Put it in your groups. And I want to acknowledge that 90% of you are going to be watching the recording. We love you. Those of you who are watching, you can still put the comments in. We go back. We take a look and we'll respond.